Okay. Functional programming, if I say, the first and foremost use case is code reusability. And whenever you have a big problem, we can modularize to divide the big problem into small problems and solve it. Say like if you want to create a cycle, bicycle, so then like we need to have two wheels and we need to have a mud gear, assembly, everything. So what we will do individually, we will make everything and we can combine together. So if you divide a big problem into small modules and you can give each one module instead of everyone coordinating with every others like what to do. So you can create like a modules. And also for better management of code also it's needed. So in future, like if you want to modify or add or something, it will be helpful. Let me see like first why we need to have a functions. We discussed about code reusability, how to use it. Let's say I have one print statements. 4 times I have print statements and I'm printing and I'm getting the result. So print is a very small statement, but still then I showed something there. So if you, instead of you doing like this, you can define one function. Basically, function will start with a def. Def is a keyword. You write anything. So whatever your function name can be anything. So it can take any arguments. But in this example, it's not taking any arguments. And what are the print statement you have? So I'm writing within it. So I have written. So what I'm doing right now, instead of again doing a print statement, once I defined, so I will call. So due to this, okay, it can be like, hello itself as a function, and I'm making a call. So instead of making a for statement separately, I define my function and I'm calling those many number of times. You may think it is silly, sir. Hello world is also a single line. It makes no big difference. Just to understand, I gave that. But if I go for one more example to understand, so let's say we are going for a binomial expression calculation. Hope you know how a binomial expression works. If you give a number, for that we have one expression, right? Binomial expression. We get the result. And similarly, if you want the same result for another number, then what you do? Again, give one more number and ask what is the result. And say like if you want to do the same thing for another number, again you give a number and you calculate the result. So like that, every time you give a number and you calculate the results. So this is how you have. This is a very good example where we can use the functions to solve the problem. So first, what is this problem? So I want to do some kind of binomial expression. So whenever I want to create a function, def is the first keyword. For this, you give one function name, binomial expression. See, everything is taking n as an input. Take that n and like, write that expression. So here we wrote like an n. Maybe like within the function, I want to write like assume like an x. I can define like that also. So whatever the result I want to do, I am defining within it. So and getting it. See how I'm expressing in terms of n. I can take another variable. Even n also I can do, x also I can do anything. So whatever the variable comes here, for that variable we do this expression and give the result. Now you see, strategic way of doing is like this. Instead of you defining these three as many times and asking, I define the entire function. Now I can just pass a variable. So all the logic will happen in the backend. So this is a straight case for you to understand. So when you need. Similarly, say like I have a numbers. So I want to get the even numbers between two limits. So generally, if you want the numbers, how you do? So I take like, 10 and if I give 30, so within that numbers, I want to calculate. So if I percentile 2 is equal to 0 and I print the value of I. So I get the values. So rather than getting the values, maybe if I want to store in a list or something. So the same logic what we had done earlier. So I store in a list like even numbers. So instead of printing them, I do like a append to that. And after that, if I ask, you get all the values. This is fine. So in this case, instead of I giving these values as numbers, I can also give some kind of like a bound, right? So like upper bound and lower bound, and I can give these values outside. So means like instead of giving this 10 and 20 here, 30 here, I can give like this, and then define these values outside is equal to so 10 comma 30. I'm defining variables and I'm asking. Now you see, this is a straight case where I got for these boundaries, I got these values. So similarly, if I instead of directly, if I want to make a print statement also, I get it, right? You got it. Similarly, if I want to repeat the same thing for a different set of values, so what if I want to repeat for like uh, say something else like, so 0 to 10 I want to get, and like 10 to 30 I want to get, and for the same things I want to get for another limit, maybe some 45 and some 57, I get some numbers. So for each of the limits, whenever I'm asking, I'm getting the results, right? So for this is one thing, this is one thing, this is one thing. And observe whenever the code is repeating, so take that repeating code and implement as a function. At the very first thing, define. And if you don't know what is the function name, write like myfunc or something. So within your logic, you write the entire thing. You can observe that, these two variables are the only things which are changing. The entire logic is same, right? For everything. Now, why can't you take these two arguments as an input? So whatever the arguments you have, take those as two as an input. That's it. So now your simple logic was done. Now for this function, if you want to give some name, you can mention that. So maybe like, get even numbers, something. If I do like a get even numbers. So, and I have a lower limit, upper limit. So instead of a upper limit and lower limit, so generally it's not a good practice to repeat the same variables outside. So what we can do, maybe like a minimum value. So like here as a maximum value. So max value. Now, whenever I'm using also, I can reuse this. So minimum value, and here also maximum value. Now you defined a function now. So with this function, if I want to evaluate, so all the things. Now you see the strategically very easy. Once I define how many times I'm calling, did you see this is the real use cases you are seeing. Once you define the function, those many number of times you're calling. For each of the things, the same logic will work. But in the entire examples, what are you seeing? I showed different examples. In the first function, there is no arguments as an input. It is just printing. In the second case, it is taking one argument and it is printing the output. In the third case, we have seen it is taking two arguments and printing the values. But down the line, I will show you much better strategies. So in this example, I want to show the code reusability. So hope you understood about the concept of code reusability. Now let's go for the defining of the functions, like function definition. So if I go further, defining functions, typically every function will be of different types. Every function typically has a diff function. So function name, and arguments. So argument one, argument two, like that. Any number of arguments, and also we have a logic within it. So logic, and we have a return statement. So returning means like what you are returning. So value or values. So if you're having like a one or something, I'm returning. It's like a typical structure of a function. Now, if you understand, some functions will take no arguments. Some functions will take one argument or any number of arguments. Sometimes functions will return something. Some functions will not return. So to understand all these things cases, let's go with the first case. Function with no arguments and no return value. So let's write a small definition for it. So to write, I am taking a small function. So like this, a function definition which I'm writing. Define hello with braces and print. When you define a function, nothing will execute. It just create an object. And observe that, so functions are also treated as a first class objects. So functions are treated as a first class objects in Python. Why functions are treated as a first class objects? Note, why functions are treated as a first class objects? Let's see that. Hello function, what you define. If I ask, hey, what is hello? It says it's a functional object. Till now you have an ordinary numbers. Let's say number one is equal to some 123. For an ordinary number, what we can do? We can ask, hey, so what is the type? What is the value, like that we can ask all. Means if I ask number one, I get it. If I want like the type of it, so, and if I want the address location, we can ask. And also we can ask the dir to get the list of attributes. This is what happens for any built-in object, right? It's an integer. So not only for integers, maybe like now let's take the same number as a true. For true also same thing I can do. You see? So whatever you have, let me write into separate lines. So for an integer, you got all the things. So similarly, let me do the same thing for a float. Yeah, so maybe like 123.3 something. For float also you got. Similarly for boolean also, if I ask, I get it. In the same fashion, we have our hello function, right? For the hello function also, we can ask all these results and we can get it. So like all these things, we have the hello function. Hello. If I take that, I need not define anything else. I can ask, hey, what is the hello? And I'm asking the type. I'm asking the address location. I'm asking the dir. Generally, in any other languages, functions are treated like not like an object, but in Python, it's an object. That's the reason it says the function object stored at this location, and it is giving the address location, and it is saying it's of type function, and even function also has an attributes. This is a beauty which you have never seen till now. What is this function as an attribute? This is something very interesting, but it works like that. Hello. So if I say like size, you get it. But still others are there. Whenever the use case is there, I will help you understand. So, okay, not deviating too much. So coming back to where we came from. So we defined a function, we understood it. At the same time, there is one more function called as callable. This is another built-in function. You see, in the entire 69 built-in functions which are told, I think like I covered almost all the built-in functions, if you see. So now we are working on something called as callable. Callable is another function which I'm touching now. So, but like I have almost all touched all of them. But still few are there like property and others, which you will see next. What is this callable function doing? Any object, tells whether it is callable or not. If I define like number one is equal to 123, and if I ask, hey, print off, say, hey, is callable, I'm asking callable of number one. Number one is an integer, right? We cannot be callable. So if I ask number one, after that, if I put a brace, it throws an error. So because it's not callable. Whereas hello is callable. Hello is a function which you define. It says true. So that's the reason for hello, if I say with braces, I get the answer. Means a function till now you define, but you never executed. So to make a list of what you have done, so the function definition and thing together. So this is a function definition, and we need to have a function call. So this is a function call. So to make a list, function definition and function call. So you can define hundreds of functions, but if you are not making call, nothing will execute. So function calls are the first step for execution. So sometimes people will execute a function like this. or sometimes they will make a print around it. You need to know when to make a print around it, when not to make a print. So in this particular function, it is not returning anything. It is taking your input and it is printing it. So then why you want it to do an extra print? If this function is returning you anything, then we need to have a print. But as this function is not returning anything, then why none came, sir? Means when you don't return anything for any function, the default return is a none. So the default return of any function is none. If you don't return also, so that is the default return. Default return is none. So due to that, so whenever you're making a call, it will happen like that. So if you are making like a print of hello also, so that's the reason you are getting a none. So now the conclusion is very clear. When you are not returning anything from the function, so don't return a print. Whenever you are returning only, you need it. So sometimes you want some action, some computation should be done. You don't want the end result. Maybe like you are given 10 records, you want to dump to a database. So you just don't want anything. You just want to execute. So like that it works. Now I told you the concept of callable and others also, but fine. And even the DAR, how it works and all those things I told. So going further, the function definition. So now if I go for the second type, so type 2, functions with one argument and no return values. Till now you understood the concept of how a function works, how the return values work, and how we need to pass the values. So this is where interesting happens. Till now what we have seen, a function which is taking no inputs, but it is executing and getting a result. So whereas now I modify a bit, I want to tell that, hey, define, say, hello of name, and I will return like print of, say, maybe like f string of hello. So which are the name was given, I want to do. It is a function. So now we define the function. For this function, if I ask, this is the definition. For everything, there will be a definition, there will be a call. So function definition, this is a definition. And generally Pepper says that, so before the function, there should be 2 lines empty. So I define this function. So after defining this function, if I ask a hello, it will throw in error. Why? It is saying that, hey, missing one required positional argument. Means when the definition, when you wrote one argument, when you are calling also, we should respect that. If you give like one argument, it will work. Say like Python, if I give, it works. So if I give like, hello, something else. So world, if I give, it say like hello world. But you should not overdo. Means if you go for language like C language or C++, so if it is asking one argument and if you give two, it will ignore the next values. It will take only the needed. Whereas in Python, not like that. If you define like one argument, you should give one only. If you define like two arguments, you should give two only. But if you define like one argument, if you give two, it will say an error. You see here what it told, hello missing one required positional argument. Here hello takes one positional argument, but two were given. So both the things will result in an error. Means whenever you have a definition, we should exactly give as much needed. So, and part of it, you need to understand the function calls. Till now you don't know. Whenever you don't give any argument, there is no problem. The moment you started giving arguments, so one interesting point you need to be aware. This is a common logic. Many people quarrel for this. Whenever you have a function which has a definition, and when you want to pass an arguments, so there are like two ways of doing it. Say, to make a list of it again, you have a function definition. Now, if you want to make a call, there are two ways. I can do like a hello of Python or like hello of name is equal to Python. The first one is like by position. So by position means, so give exact values. Give exact values. So exact number of values. So the second one is by keywords. Here, give exact names of arguments. So you understood that if I say do by position means what? If I give hello, so this also will throw error. So throw error, right? Less than that, if you give also, it will throw error. If I give like more than that also, it will throw error. That you have seen. So it will throw error. Exact values you need to give. In the same fashion, so here, if I want to give like a position also, the same logic we need to follow. So in this case, it works. If you give name is equal to, what if I say like something else? Say like if I say student name. So who the student name is? The name is like the argument name, whatever you have given. If the argument name exactly should be there. If you give any other name, it doesn't work. So then like in which case, sir, it is much more useful. So whenever you're going for more than one argument, then this will be more useful. I will tell you why. So let me take the third use case. So type 3, function with two arguments and no return values. In this case, let's make a definition. So for every function I told there will be two things. One is a definition and other one is a value. In this definition, you see I have two values, name and age. I define. So as you know, when you're making a calls, there are two ways. By position. So function call by position. If I do like a hello, it will throw an error. Says like, you need two arguments, but you didn't give. Just to make a note, I'm not giving too much. I'm just writing here itself. If I pass like the first one, say good or one Ritu, if I give one value, it says what? Even if I give one value also, it is throwing an error saying that, hey, you have given one argument, but I'm expecting two arguments. So if in this case, if I go for the next one, if I pass like some 67, I give two arguments, then it's another issue which is indentation, which we need to be careful. Now, did you see? You have two arguments, you gave two arguments. It's working. But the one problem with this positional arguments is that we should be careful about what arguments you are passing. Else it will throw an error. So it means like it would be mischievous. So not every time it may result in an error. So but it would be like logical issues may come. What if user has given the values in a reverse order? 67 so and so. It will say like 67 age is good one reason. Do you think it makes sense? Just imagine the same logic you are doing for a username password like a server. Then what will happen? It will log the username, right? If too many attempts you make with the wrong attempts. So in these cases, so whenever you want to be very careful about which arguments, how you are passing, then like functions, so function call by arguments. So by function call by uh, uh, keywords, sorry, keywords will be useful. In this keywords where if I do like a hello of, so what are the names I have? The exact name I need to give. So name is equal to Gudo one Rusum I give. And second one is age is 67. If I do like this also, it works. Or if I do these values in a reverse order also, it works. You see now what happened? Either if I give these values in any order, it understood what to give, right? So that is the beauty of this call by keywords. So the keywords will have a say whenever you have more than one value in the arguments, and whenever you are very want to sure in terms of the ordering. So if you are sure about the order is perfect, there is no point of going for keyword arguments. But each one has its own advantages whenever you are going. Hope you understood in which ways to go. Even in this case also, if you go for too many arguments or if you add any extra argument, it will throw an error. Now let's go for the next case. So I think the fourth one, right? So type 4, function with two arguments and return value. So we can have 3, 4, 5, any number of arguments, but till now we didn't see the concept of return values. So let's go for the return values. Now let me define a function, say addition function, which is taking two arguments and we are taking some return value. Say I am doing a return. If I don't return, so first of all, if you want to make a empty function also we can do, right? If you want a empty function to make the syntax good, I can write like this. So if I do like this, if I define a function and I make a call, even in this case also, when you make a call, so we need to adhere to the logic. If I do without number of calls, it should be there. So every time two parts will be there for every function. One is function definition. In the function definition, how many arguments are there? In the function call also, we need to adhere to that. Say like I am giving 13 and some 34, 64, something. It will work. Did you see in this logic, I am not defining anything. So, okay, fine. So what if I want to print this result? So I told that whenever you are printing a result, you will get a none every time because it is not returning. So even when you don't return, the default return is none. So because, default return is none. So assume that the same function I am defining right now. So if I do a return, so same like a pass, I wrote a return. So till now I am not storing the result to something. So maybe I will store to something like a answer. Answer is equal to, okay. And I'm asking, hey, so print type of answer and get the answer, which are is coming. Now you see what will happen. It will happen like this. It will return the result. So you got like, as you are not returning anything, you got like that. So though you pass the arguments, you are not doing anything, fine. So if you return like explicitly return none also, you get the same. Or if you return something else, so maybe like, I do like instead of a return, I do some computation. Say result is equal to, so n1 plus n2 I do. So I have done a result. But if I don't return anything, I did a computation, will I get anything? No. Though you did a computation, you should be returning them. So only when you return, so it will be coming. So in this case, if I do a return of this result, now did you see? This computation is happening and you are getting a result. Now to make it sure, like you can pass some other values, say instead of 34, some 45 I pass. Now you see the result. So for my values, what are his result is coming is coming. This is fine. Okay, sir. So what if I have multiple returns? So if there are multiple returns, the first return will be taken. So what if I have like, return none also? So last statement is not reachable. So you need to understand this is one thing. Note that function exists. So exists uh, once return is encountered. So for the first time when you get a return, so it will be returned. So that's the reason though you have some other return also, it will not execute further. So whenever you have like anything, if I do like a return of say 100, I get return 100 only. If there were like multiple returns, you get only one amount there. So which one? The first return, whichever it is encountered. So similarly, if I have something like this, say like, return of dot, you observe carefully, the moment I place a dot, it becomes a floating point value. And similarly, not only that, if I do like, instead of that, return, uh, yeah, so if I do like instead of a dot, let me a dot be, and if I place a comma, this is very much careful because the moment you place a comma, it becomes a tuple. This is a sure, short, and most important point we need to be aware of. So in the functions, if you return, during the return, if I place a comma at the end, it will treat it as a tuple. That's why we be careful whenever you're returning something. So when you have multiple returns, the first encountered return will come. But if that return has a comma at the end, so be careful, it will treat like a tuple. And what if you have like a two values? So return like, so 100 dot comma 100. So when you have two values, anyhow it's a tuple. But when you have single value, so be careful. And also, if you say like, the first return, the encountered, it will stop. It doesn't mean that every time it should stop like that. So maybe like, so if number one is greater than number two, say return number one. So yeah, if number one is number two is so greater than number two, return number two. So else, so return something equal. So you want to do a comparison, okay? So comparison is a function that you want to create. So for that comparison function, I am doing to check. You see in this case what happened? It will say that both are equal. So if it is greater like that, so number two is greater than so and so, fine. So if nothing like that, it is written. Is it correct logically? So basically number one is less. So we wrote the same logic in a different way, right? So we should say like, number one is less than number two, we should return. So that's what my logical mistake. So these kind of logical mistakes, you cannot do a other way. Debugging is the only way for you to do. So if you have like multiple returns also, it doesn't mean that every time the first return will execute. Based upon the logic, whichever it encounters first, it will execute that. So now you understood about how this will be working, how it can help us if there are multiple returns and so on. So the two conclusions from this function that we can learn is that by default function will have a return is none, and return is the last statement in any function. Next thing. So further, if I go in the functions, whenever you have returning multiple values, the most common thing comes is like unpacking. You know this concept of unpacking, which I told earlier also, but I'm still telling. Unpacking means like whenever you have like two variables, and instead of assigning in two different lines, you can do the concept of unpacking, where you can assign the both the things in a single line. For unpacking, the same number of variables and number of values, so should be equal. And unpacking works. The same thing I repeated with one more example is like this. You see, I have three variables which are defined, and I'm asking those values. Rather, so three variables on one side and three values on the other side. This is also perfect example for unpacking. Means whenever you are returning two values or three values, you can directly assign. So, but we should be careful about. So the other two logics means whenever you have more number of variables and less number of variables or values, then it will say no more, not enough values to unpack. At the same time, if you have less variables and more values, then also issues. And if you just have a single value, then it will treat like a tuple. So hope you know this concept also. Now we understood the concept of unpacking. So based upon this unpacking, if you see our built-in functions also, Let me give some examples. We have some built-in functions also. If you take the examples of a int, if you give a floating point value, it will return a single value. Whereas a power built-in function, it will take two arguments but return a single value. But did you remember the devmod function? It is doing the operation and returning two values. And if you want to do your own custom devmod function, so we can do the same way. So means whenever you are getting the values, correspondingly you can assign to variables. As first one is returning a single value, you assign to a single variable. Second one to a single variable. But third one, it is giving two values. That's why you assign to two variables. So in the same fashion, if I define a function with two arguments, or like one argument or whatever might be, here the number of arguments doesn't matter, but what is the return matters. In this function, you are not taking any input, but when you make a call, it will return. See, for the first time, you have a return, but when you make a call, so you will see the output. That's it. As you are in interactive mode. But if you do the same thing in a script mode, you will not see that because there is no print anywhere. But if you are assigning to some variable, trying to get the result, then you can see it is of type tuple and you get the values. Because you are returning two values, right, at a time. As you are returning two values, you have a possibility. The result is stored in this variable. Result is a tuple containing two values. Zeroth value is 123 and first value is 45. Then you can assign these two values to two independent variables and you can extract. Rather, if you want, using unpacking also we can do the same thing. Unpacking means as hello, when you're making a call, you're getting two values. So when you're returning itself, you are assigning to two variables and I'm getting the values. So like that, if you want to create your own custom, say, custom devmod function. So we know how the devmod function works. If I say like define, so my devmod, I'm writing because we should not override the existing functions. It's not a good practice. If you are given a number, so numerator and denominator, if you are given. So what we should return? Two values, right? So generally, devmod will give two results at one shot. In the same fashion, how you can compute? Individually, you can compute the quotient. Quotient is equal to numerator floor division, denominator, and the remainder is equal to numerator percentile denominator. And don't you think that you can return quotient comma remainder? If I do my dev mod, or like in both the ways, it should give the same answer. If I say print of f of my dev mod of 10 comma 2. So and using dev mod function also I will do. Dev mod function also I will do the same thing. You see the output? Both are exactly giving the same answer. So it means I wrote my own logic in such a way. So as it is returning two values, I can assign also to two variables. So as I wish. So similarly, if I do the same thing to two variables, I get the result. So same like the built-in so and so, here also I can assign to two variables. So quotient comma reminder is equal to, so my div mod of 10 comma 3. I can assign to two variables and I can take those values directly. You see, I'm assigning and taking. So this is how I can work. Similarly, if I go further, let me take a real world use case, like to display the sum of the given values. So if you want to have a problem, so where you want to display the sum of some values. So if you are given some values and if you want to do the summation, let's take the example of a function with arguments. If I take the function with arguments, say like I have three arguments, it will do. Now for this function, as I told, it will take like three arguments exactly. Because it defined three arguments, we need to pass three arguments. If you give exactly 3 arguments, it will work. If you give less or more also, it will not work. So fine. So if it is like 2 arguments, you need to pass to 2 arguments function, 3 arguments, 3 arguments function, 4 arguments, 4 arguments function, like that. So for this, to avoid, so we have a better strategy. I told that we can use the sum built-in function, but sum built-in function, if you pass the values directly, this would be a problem. So this is the most common problem that any beginner will does. Sum built-in function, I told earlier also. Earlier we used a list directly. So here when you are individually passing, it will not work. You need to understand that some function will take like a iterable only. You give like a list or a tuple or a set or a dictionary, it will take like a iterable only. If you pass like that, it will work. So not only that, so if you go for the help, if you want more details, you can go for the help of this function. So to understand more, see, like it is taking an iterable and apart from that start value. So I showed you this earlier also, but just to make a list, if I show, if I assign, see here, if I take a list or a tuple, it will work in the same way. Even if I take a set also, it will work. For summation, it doesn't matter, right? Which one you add first, which one you add next. So though order is not coming properly, it will not make any difference for us. So as here, for a summation, order makes no difference. So we can get the same thing. Next, not only that, we can give some kind of offset also for it and do. And apart from that, what if you create like a dictionary also, you can pass. Even if you give a dictionary also, by default, when you're looping, it will take only the keys. So which are the keys are there? 10, 20, 30, 50. Only they it will execute. It is same like working with dictionary dot keys also. At the same time, here, if I go with the dictionary dot values, can I do for that? If I take in this example, dictionary dot values. What are the dictionary dot values? A, B, C, D, right? If I do like a summation, will it work? No, because this dictionary dot sum will do the summation with a zero basically. Why it is saying that I cannot add a integer and string? Because I told you whenever you're doing a summation, the default value would be like a zero. So that's the reason it says I cannot add. So even if you give like a string also, some function is not designed for adding the strings basically. If you do like that also, it will throw in error. Says that, hey, use delimiter.join whenever you want to join a string. So some function is mainly for integers, floats, all these kinds of numeric computations. But if you are really interested in string concatenation, go for delimiter.join. And there is one more use case for the this one, which is asked in most interview questions, is about flatten a list. Generally, if you are given a list of lists like this, so and if you are asked to flatten this list, how do you do? So you need to go to each of the values and get the values and append. Means, so I create an empty list. Finally, I loop over each other one. And if I print like each, you can notice that each one is a separate list again. So for this list, if I try to append, so dot append if I do, and finally, if you ask that flat list, did you see again you got the same thing? So instead of append, if I do like an extend, then you'll notice the difference. Extend means it will take an iterable only, but add to the same dimension. Did you understand how it worked? You looped over inning and you have extending. So now you understood append is extend is good. So the extend operation can also be done like this, plus equal to, so each, because both are like lists only. We can do like this also, either using extend or using plus equal to. So both ways it works in the same way. But if you want to do that in a much smarter way, so we need to go for the sum built-in function. But if I go for the sum built-in function directly, it will throw in error. It says that I cannot add an integer and a string list. You know, right, how it works. It will not work directly. Then, sir, can I go with like my data? So till now we have like a 0, right? So 0 is the default whenever you work. Again, the same error comes. So to avoid this problem, so you can comment it and you pass the default value is the empty list. Now you see it will work. Just to show the things in a single way, whenever you have a list of lists, so if you want to concatenate them in a one shot, so some built-in function can help. But so we need to pass extra this argument. So trust me, this is the most important thing you will really love afterwards whenever you're working. Not only this, so whenever you have like a list of tuples, if you want to add a list of tuples, then we need to have this as a tuple, because Python is a strictly typed language. List can be added to a list only, tuple can be added to a tuple only, and can set be added to a set? Set concatenation. It's not possible, right? So let me show the same thing. So set concatenation is not possible. So we cannot do that. Because list concatenation, tuple concatenation is possible. So that's the reason this summation is also possible. But if I do like the same thing with the set, it doesn't work like that. Set means like empty set, we cannot write like a braces, right? We need to write like this, empty set. So what happened? Set concatenation, it is not possible. That's why we cannot achieve it. So this is what you need to be aware of. Set concatenation is not possible. Next, similarly, this some built-in function will fail in one more scenario, where if you have all as one tuples or all as sets, it works. If you have some as tuple and some as a set, so some as a list, in that case, some built-in function cannot help you. So in this case, we cannot have the value as a list, because suddenly when you have a list, tuples will come. Suddenly, okay, if not, if I go with like, one of them is tuple, other one is like a list, right? So list cannot be connected to tuple, tuple cannot be connected to list. So in that case, first we need to cleanse them and do. And also, whenever you have like different data types, means like if I have something like this, so I have a tuple, but I have individual elements. So in that case also, this sum built-in function cannot help us. So these are the two edge cases where we cannot work on it. So for these two things to work, you need to create your own function. So let me give a small assignment for you. The point is very simple. Implement a function, so like a sum, in your own custom function. So which should do all these operations. If everything is clean, you do a direct operation. If it is throwing an error, then so you do the operation. I do gave the first method, right, where you do a for loop and concatenate all of them. So like that you need to do. But the problem is that if you get different data types, how to address it? To understand the data types, there is a new built-in function called as isInstance. So till now we have a type, right? Like a type built-in function, there is one more thing like isInstance. So that's also can help you. So whenever you are working, it will help us. So for better understanding, and you can write based upon that. Similarly, so what is this actually doing is, instead of you asking a type and thinking, so so instead of we doing like type of int is type of 123, you can just say like is instance of 123. So so both exactly works in the same way. So okay, if I convert that to a Python, yeah, you see now, yeah, you see now what will happen. So what happened? If you want to check, traditionally means type of int is equal to type of so and so. So like that we need to compare. So that is a too much of task. Instead of you doing that much task, you can simply do by using isInstance. So either you give int first and 123 next, or 123 first and int next, it doesn't matter. So whether both are same or not. So it will check and give you the result. In the same lines, if I go for other data types also, I can ask. hey, whether this is a type of float or so and so. With these things, you give a try and you will understand how to work. So the next thing that I want to touch base is about functional programming with these things. So type 5, I guess. Okay. Function overwriting problem. What is this function overwriting problem? So if you go for languages like interpreter-based languages, like Python and others, you have this problem. So because functions are treated like a variables, so it will have this problem. Means function doesn't support the overloading concept. What is this function overloading? So why this support is not there? So to understand further, let me give a very simple example. If I say like number one is equal to say, okay, if I say number one is equal to 100, and similarly number one again is equal to 200. And if I ask a print number one, now tell me what will be the value? Will it be 100 or 200? So whichever is latest, that is 200, you will get it. So this is a common sense. In the same fashion, whenever you define a function, so with the same name twice, say in the case one. So in case one, I am defining so two functions. Did you see here? Interesting part is both the functions have the same name, but different number of arguments. So it has like two arguments, it has like three arguments. Fine. Now, after defining the function, so functions also have this concept of attributes. I told the dir, right? For the functions also. So in the functions, if I see in the dir, there is something like arguments. There should be something like a arguments or um, yeah, kw arguments defaults is giving, but like arguments it's not giving. Not sure. So earlier it should be there somewhere, but not sure. Fine. So we can get that also. But point is like if you define functions for this function, if I pass like a two arguments and three arguments, how it works, let's see. So first you define like three arguments. Let me execute. The moment I executed three arguments, it is throwing an error. But if I execute two arguments, it will work perfectly because whichever is latest, that will be stored. Means this addition function will take only two arguments now. Whereas if I go the same thing in a reverse direction, means like case 2. In case 2, I define first like a two arguments, then like a three arguments. Now you see, if I define execute again, the same addition, if I pass like a three arguments. So as three arguments is the last one, it will execute perfectly. Whereas if I go for a two arguments, it will throw in error. So this concept is called as overwriting. Means when you have two functions with the same name, so the latest one will overwrite the existing one. So the same problem will happen even when you go for methods also. So there is something called as method overloading. So overwriting. We don't have the concept of overloading. Overloading means in C language it is there where if you have two functions with same name but different arguments, so when you make a call with three arguments, it will go to three arguments function. When you make a two arguments, it will go to two arguments function. So that concept is called as overloading. But in Python, we don't have that. We have only overwriting. So the latest one will overwrite the previous one. But sir, what if I want to handle both the cases? Means like I want to handle in this case, I want to create a function which will need to take both two arguments and three arguments also. In that case, we need to go for the next type, which is functions with default arguments. So what is this default arguments? How it can help us? If I take two functions, the same thing you define, the two functions you define. So you want like two arguments and three arguments, right? So what you will do is like you define like instead of a two arguments and three arguments, in one shot you define like a three arguments only. So in both the things you take like a common. Whenever you were given two arguments, take the third one as a default. Then in this case, what will happen? If you give two arguments also it works, three arguments also it gives. So if in this case, if you make a call after defining this function, now you see, when you give it two arguments, the third argument is a default. Default argument means in the definition itself you gave the argument. So, and one more point you need to remember whenever you are going is that, so in the default arguments, what are the arguments you give, that should be defined in the last only. So that's the reason, see here, the default argument is placed in the last only. So, okay. So if I go here for this function, as we define something as a default, we can give, as functions are also like an objects, we can ask the size, name, defaults like that. So this function has a name of addition. So size is like 128 bytes and the default arguments is 0. So one of the default argument is 0, right? Now for the first time you saw that. Similarly, let me take one more use case. I have a function where, say like I have a function where I want to give like a hello world. If I give hello world, means without arguments it's working, right? Similarly, so with argument also it will work. Means like if I pass like one argument, it's working, right? One argument I passed and I'm passing this argument. In both cases it's working. And if I want both the conditions to execute together, I need to write in one function where the default. So whenever the function is not given, you are defining like hello world. So whenever you give a name, you are defining, right? So the default value is world. So I define, so that name is equal to world. Now we see in this case, if I make a call to it again, so with arguments and without arguments, both the case it works. So this is how we need to define the default arguments. Similarly, if I go for one more function, say like I want to create some kind of statement operator. If you observe here, I have like three arguments and two arguments are defaults. I have age is equal to 24, qualification is BTech, and name I give. I want to define some function and whatever the inputs you have passed, that I want to return like a single statement. It's a very good function, right? But it will not work. The reason being is that non-default arguments should follow the default arguments. This is what most important point. Means in this particular problem, what are the default arguments are there, that should be in the last. Means name is not a default argument, so that should be defined first. So the same definition I will take, just the placement of the value name. If I remove the name there and I place in the starting, then it will work like perfect. So for this, now in this case, if you see, you have one mandatory argument and like two default arguments. If you ask like, so statement dot underscore underscore defaults, you see that there were two defaults. It will just like take two defaults, but the defaults are for which argument it will not tell. It will give in this way. Now, if the function, if I make without any arguments, it will throw an error because there is one mandatory argument for which you need to pass. So if you pass that, then it will work. So if I pass like a one mandatory argument, so I can do like, call two ways, right? Either with the position also I can do, by a keyword also I can do. So if I execute now, it will work. So what are the function is there? It's working as it is. Similarly, if I pass like two arguments, so for the same function, if I pass two arguments, what will happen? The first one, by position it will go. First one is name, second one is age. So what are the second value give? It's like an age, it will go. So if you give explicitly also, it will go like that. Means when you give a value, it will take yours. But if you don't give, it will take the default values. So in both the cases, see beat echo is coming, right? So in third case, you pass an argument and you are giving a value like mtech right now. Now in C, whatever you give, it is coming. And in the last case, if I give like a single value, The remaining are like defaults. So like that it is coming. But one thing you need to be aware is, so in the default arguments is the leakage problem. So type 7 default arguments. So leakage problem. So to understand more about the leakage problem, we need to say that, so what is this leakage problem when it occurs? In fact, this is one of the anti-patterns that we need to be aware. Anti-pattern means the pattern which we need not follow or we should not follow. So generally, whenever we have a default arguments, the problem comes whenever you have the default arguments as a mutable values. When you have mutable values, let's say I define a function. Within that, whatever the function, this my list is there, its address location and the existing value I'm printing. Within that, whatever the value you have passed, I am trying to append to it. Means I am appending like this. And finally returning that my list only. It's a simple function. Now for this function, I want to pass different arguments and see what will be the result. So every time it is taking a list and it will return the list only. So I define this function, and in that function, I am passing like 123, which is a number, and I'm passing like an empty list here. When I pass a empty list, I get a value, which is something I got. Similarly, I pass like one more value. Say this time, I'm not passing the second variable. The second variable is a list. So which is a my list. Here as anyhow I have default, I am passing directly. In that case also it will work. So we are getting some other address location. The value is 10 because it's an empty. So first time you passed an empty list. So second time you passed a list with something, you got it. And in the third case, if I pass like one more value, say this time, if I am passing like A, so what you expect? Again, it should create like an empty list and do. But did you see that it is working on the same list? Means to make the things easy for you, I am writing all of them in a single line. You see, and this one also in a single line, single cell. So then you can better relate. Now we see in one shot I am doing. So what you can understand, in the first case I am taking 123 and an empty list. In that empty list, so it is taking the values like 123. So because it's an empty list, it will add this value. In the second case, I have a 10. I didn't pass anything. So it is using the default arguments, right? So using default list. And in the third case also, it's using the default list. The default list means the list is created during the definition. Only once it will be created. So if you pass, it will use whatever the list you have given. If not, it will use the default one which is created during definition. So in the two cases, it is using the same list. If you observe, in the first case, as you placed an explicit list, it is giving the address location differently. But in the second and third case, did you see the same list is coming? So what is the problem mainly means? Both are using the list which is defined at the during the definition time. So in the first case also same thing happens, second case also same thing happens. So it is kind of repeating because I am doing again, right? So to avoid that, I will define again. So because I repeated the code, it is doing. If I do now, you will understand in one shot. I defined this function and I'm passing. In the first case, 123. Second case, for the first time, you're using built-in default. And in the third case, you are using the existing value. So that is how it works. What is then what is the solution for this problem? So if you see the solution, you just need to do a small extension to this. So solution for this problem is, whenever you want to make some of them as a list or something, you mark it as a default, as a none or something, and you refine within it. So if my list is none, then you define my list is equal to like this. So this is a very smart way. Now in this case, though everything is using default, so instead of defining at the definition stage, within function you are defining, right? So then everything will be unique. Did you see the address locations are different? So there is no problem in the definition. And also the same thing can also be done using a Boolean short circuiting. Hope you remember. So instead of we writing like this, if it is none and repeating like this, we can also write like this, my list or empty list. Hope you remember the or function I told. If the first one is correct, it will be there itself. If not, it will go to the next value, right? So using Boolean short circuiting also we can do. So this is also problem solving. I am actually telling the real world problems that you will face and how you need to address it. Okay, this is fine. So why we came all the way? Because we are into default arguments. In the default arguments, we have worked. So we have seen the problems that we're gonna face. And coming to the type 8, we have seen a default arguments means during the definition itself you give such that during call, if you don't give also it will work. But there is another thing called as variable arguments. So these kind of functions are called as variadic functions. This is very, very interesting. In a functional programming, it is supported a lot. Variadic functions means functions which can take any number of arguments. The simple examples for you is the built-in function like a print. So the print built-in function, you pass like any number of arguments, any different data types, it is taking any number of values, not even a single value also. In all the cases, it is working, right? So that's a beauty. If you want to define such a function, so we need to understand that whenever you are defining the function, you need to define like this. You define only one argument, but before that argument, you write a star. But when you are using, you need not have a star. You can just write directly. So this is what is this star making? It will create like a variable arguments. So the beauty of writing like this is that the moment you define a function like this, you can pass arguments. If you don't write this argument star, it will throw an error, because for the very first time itself it will throw an error. Hey, I need one value. But the magic will be there, like if you movement a star, it will take everything. And within that, I am defining like what are the values, what is the type I'm asking. Did you see in all the cases it's of type tuple only? When you give zero values also, it's an empty tuple. When you give one value, it's a one tuple with one value. Tuple with two values, tuple with any number of values. So don't you think that it's an interesting thing? Similarly, if you want to define your own in like custom print function, so you can define like that. You define like star args. Within that, you are looping out each of the value and I'm printing. And you know the print statement with a sep and end and others. So how they are working. If I define, so don't you think I implemented like a built-in print function? So not only that, like I can do any kind of logic. Maybe like before every print, I want to do some modifications. Maybe like I want to print the date and time. Of course, there is a module called as date time, which we'll see afterwards. But if I do like this, it will print the date time actually. So if I use that, you see now, before every function, the date time timestamp is coming and the values are coming, kind of like a log or something. But what I am trying to help you is that we can take so function with variable arguments like this. In the same fashion, there is one more thing called as type 9. If I say functions with variable keyword arguments, this is another thing. Like a variable argument, it is slightly different. Till now, we are aware of variable arguments, but there is one more thing called as variable keyword arguments. So variable arguments means 1 star. Variable keyword arguments means 2 stars. What it does is that it will take the values not directly, but like a key equal to value. Hope you remember there are two ways of passing a function calls, right? By position, by keyword. So they defined like this. By keyword, if you pass single star. So by value, if you pass, so like a single star. By keyword, means a key equal to value like that, it is a keyword arguments. And did you see whatever you pass, it is taking like a dictionary. If you pass like a single value or multiple values, it works like that. Now, let me take a combination of both of them together. So keyword arguments and variable arguments and variable keyword arguments. The same thing is also called as star args and star KW args, they say. So most commonly people say it as KW args, means keyword args. But it doesn't mean that KW args is a variable. We can define anything. That's why I define like a given and feed in something. So both the types I'm asking, both the values I'm asking. I'm printing some statements such that I will get a gap. Why I'm giving like I want to see both the results. Now, if you make a function calls, for each call you will see the difference. So maybe like I don't want this also, just to print it. You see now what will happen. When I make a function call without zero arguments, see what happened. When I made with the zero arguments, I'm getting a tuple. So you know single star means it will give a tuple. So 2 stars means it will give like a dictionary. And you did give nothing, so you got like that. Whereas if you pass like a single arguments means you can give two ways. If I give like a direct argument, you see, if I give like a direct argument, it will take like a tuple. So whereas if I pass like a key equal to value, it will take like a dictionary. Similarly, if I have like a two arguments, in that case also the same thing gonna happen. If I pass like a two arguments also, so let me write here only in a single place so that you can see both together. See, earlier keyword arguments throwed an error because that particular variable you define is not defined. But the moment you have a 2 stars, it can take anything for that matter. In both the cases, if you see, in the first case, as you passed by position, everything is treated as a tuple. As you passed as a key equal to value, all were treated as a dictionary. The whatever the given key will be the dictionary key, value you get. In the same fashion, if I do a combination, you see the first values are all ordinary arguments and the remaining arguments are all keyword arguments. You see now, if I do like this, now we see in this case, whatever the values you give directly, they will be treated directly. And what are the values like keyword arguments, they will go directly. And one of the best practice you need to follow here is that, okay, you define the variables directly, then you give keywords. And finally, if you want to define some two arguments. So this is not possible. Generally, it is a best practice that first we need to define the ordinary arguments, keyword arguments every time during definition, during call, both the times it should be at the last only. So then only it will work. So this is a thing we need to be aware of. If I define them here, then it will work perfectly. So this is all about the keyword arguments. But still, so recently they introduced much better things. So I don't want to confuse you more. But if you want to be learning more, there are other things like, so they have given like an entire structure like this. In Python 3.8, they introduced this new structure saying that some arguments, sometimes you want like only position like that. Some arguments you want in sometimes only like keyword arguments, or some things can be either of the way. In those cases, you can define like this. You see, after the arguments, there is something like a slash and an asterisk. We can use them to define in whatever way we want. Means very simple. So let me define a small function. So like this. Say I have a small function like this. So A, B, C and D is equal to so and so. Means what? So first three values you didn't give. The last value you gave a default value. Means what? You can make a function call in different ways. Means, so you can give 3 arguments, then the fourth argument will be default. Or you can give fourth argument also, it will work. Or you can give first 3 arguments directly and the last 2 argument like a keyword. So, or like you can give all as a keyword or 2 as a keyword, whichever you want. But the same definition, I will define slightly different. So means, along with this definition, I am adding one more argument like a slash. The beauty of this slash is that the moment you add it, you are telling that, hey, arguments before it should be like a position only. So means you are telling that, so we can write a docstring here. So args before slash should be position only. Position only arguments means what? So let me see. You have these scenarios, right? Whichever you have, the same logic I will execute. So you see, the first one is like 3 arguments, 4 arguments. Fine, all these things are good. So this also will work. So these 3 will work perfectly. But for the last one, there will be a problem because the first 2 arguments cannot be with keywords. As they told, first 3 arguments, A, B, C, should be defined directly with a this only. If I define other way, it will say that, so got some position only arguments passed as a keyword arguments. Means not only like passing exactly, so we should adhere to this kind of logics also. So similarly, if I want to give one more example, say generally we have like a power operation. So the built-in function called as a power operation, right? If I give like 2 arguments also works, 3 arguments also it works, right? Means like if I give 2 arguments, it do a power, 3 arguments, it will do a modulo and give the answer. What if I want the third argument to be like a keyword only every time? So or like optionally. So in that case, I can pass like this. Means I wrote some logic, it ignore it. I wrote slash. Means I want the first 2 arguments to be like a position only. So the last 2 argument you can give like this or like this. But the first 2 arguments you should give like this. If I pass the 3 values together, then it will throw an error to me. Hey, then it may not work. So even if you take like a single value directly like that also, it will not work. So not even a single argument before slash should be taken like a position argument. So this is what the most important point. Similarly, if you want to reserve something like a function only argument, so that also can be done. So function only argument, if you want to make, I told the same logic, right? Here, the star. So slash means before that, star means after that. Means we can define like this. Means sometimes you want some logic to be done in a proper way. Let me write a small function. So this is the real time I do like this only. If I have a server name, username, password, generally what happens when you make a call, you give the values, right? So observe carefully in this, I have given like 3 different ways. Okay. Did you observe something interesting here? First one is server name. I gave facebook.com, username, password. Second one is also surname. So password I gave, username I gave. Means I didn't give in a proper order. Then I gave like, username, password and Facebook. Actually, I should give server name, username, password. The first one is like a correct order and the remaining 2 are like not correct order. So then what will happen? So when you give perfectly, it is good. But in other cases, it will think like, username is like a password, password is like username. Okay, here I'm just printing. What if you connect to the servers? So when you give the wrong things, it will lead to a problem. So to avoid this kind of scenario, if you want to make something to be like a mandatory in a particular way, so in those cases we can define. In this particular function, if you see, after server name, I'm mentioning the username and password. Before that, I wrote a star. Means the server name you give directly or indirectly, it's up to you. But these two values should be like this only. So, so if the first one, if you pass like this or like a surname, it will work. But for the last one, so last two values, you should pass like a username password only. So due to that, like there will be very less chance. There won't be any chance of misusage, right? If I define something like a instead of a username, if I write a password, then it will not happen. If still if I say username is equal to and if I write a password value, that is a my mistake. No one can help me. So but like so it can help you better protect, right? For in terms of usage. So in those cases I'm telling. So whenever you have that kind of use cases, we can make use of it. But like so final conclusion. So I want to make you to understand is that so whenever you are working, so the recommended order for this is like this. Whenever you're defining first positional arguments, then keyword equal to value and a star and keyword arguments. Whenever you have all the values, this is the order you need to follow. Say if I have a function, you see now, so the positional arguments, position only, then like position or so and so, and this thing means here this C and D can be either way. So but like so E and F must be like a keywords only. So A B should be must be like a positional arguments only. So like that we need to define. So hope it is clear till now. So okay.